Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. I want you to step into the role of the jury, and I'll be your expert witness. We're going to conduct a deep dive forensic analysis into a massive, systemic failure of institutional accountability in the cybersecurity world. We're talking about how monolithic organizations handle or mishandle our data when things go totally south. And even more importantly, we're going to look at how one digital dissident used a tactic called radical transparency to fight back. All right, let's just dive right in. Take a look at this quote right here. It says, "The conflict between reputation shielding and citizen data protection results in a bankruptcy of public trust." Man, that really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly frames the core problem we're unpacking today. Whenever a cyber breach happens, institutions, whether they're big governments or massive private corporations, they're faced with a choice. Do they protect their own administrative continuity and their precious public reputation? Or do they protect the actual safety of the citizens whose data just walked out the door? You already know the answer. Far too often, they choose to shield themselves, leaving the public completely in the dark. So, this deliberate choice actually has a name. We call it the Protocol of Silence. And I want to be clear here. This isn't just accidental negligence or an oops moment. It's a structural defense mechanism. Institutions purposefully sweep breaches under the rug. Maybe they categorize them as minor informatic incidents, or they just drag their feet on disclosure. Why? Well, to manage immediate PR and dodge the regulatory hammer. But here's why this is absolutely crucial for you and me. This strategy fundamentally compromises our security. It's a massive moral hazard. The institution gets a safe face, sure, but those critical vulnerabilities, yeah, they stay wide open and completely unaddressed. And that brings us to the real-world danger here, a concept known as the security gap. In our industry, you know there's always a time lag between a threat actor exploiting a system and the good guys developing a defense against it. It's just reality. But institutional secretism, it intentionally inflates this gap. By choosing silence, an institution transforms what should be a temporary, fixable technical failure into a permanent state of mass indefensibility. The clock is literally ticking on your stolen data, but because of this protocol of silence, you don't even know the game has started. Section 1. The cost of silencing. So, what's the actual tangible cost of this strategy? Let's move from the theory to the forensic reality. What actually happens when institutions actively suppress critical vulnerability data and go after the very researchers who find it? Well, when they prioritize silence, they engage in information siloing. They systematically refuse to share forensic data, think specific bypass techniques or crucial indicators of compromise, with the broader security community. By silencing these security researchers and suppressing the data, they completely prevent a unified defense. Unpatched legacy protocols just sit there, totally exposed. And threat actors, they get to just repeatedly weaponize the exact same attack vectors against new targets. Plus, it creates this massive chilling effect. Ethical researchers become completely terrified to report anything they find. To give you an idea of just how severe this chilling effect can get, take a look at this 2017 police press release. It details what is essentially a kinetic attack on a well-known ethical researcher named Alberto Daniel Hill. Alberto did the right thing. He responsibly disclosed some truly catastrophic vulnerabilities at a major medical provider down in Uruguay, flaws that exposed hundreds of thousands of patient records. And instead of fixing the issues and, sending him a thank you card, the system hit him with judicial retaliation. He was wrongfully incarcerated. It's a textbook forensic example of how institutions will literally destroy their own nation's defensive workforce just to maintain that protocol of silence. Moving on to Section 2, Exhibit A, the B-Prime breach. But what happens when these silencing tactics are rolled out today and someone actually decides to fight back? Let's start with the raw forensic facts. 53. That's the number of gigabytes of highly sensitive data that got leaked in this massive breach of a Mexican cybersecurity firm called B-Prime. To put that into perspective, 53 gigs of pure text and config data is absolutely huge. We're talking live surveillance camera feeds, incredibly sensitive client data, and, get this, even Cisco Meraki administrative panels. This wasn't some minor glitch or a tiny misconfiguration. This was total operational exposure. And the irony here? It is just staggering. B-Prime was out there selling their clients premium, top-tier cybersecurity protection. Yet, behind the scenes, they were running their own administrative accounts without basic two-factor authentication. I mean, come on. A firm whose entire business model is selling you security suffered a catastrophic breach simply because they couldn't be bothered to turn on 2FA for their own critical systems. You really can't make this stuff up. So, how do you think they reacted when this incredible level of negligence was exposed? Spoiler alert, B Prime's immediate reflex was not to apologize or rush to secure their clients. Nope. Their response was throwing out hostile legal threats. They started accusing researchers and journalists of defamation, threatening to sue them into oblivion just to completely silence any coverage of the breach. Basically, they deployed the protocol of silence via legal intimidation. Contrast that knee-jerk reaction with the actual ethical necessity for responsible disclosure and, frankly, radical transparency. Which brings us to Section 3, Tactics of Radical Transparency. Now, B Prime fully expected their legal bullying to force the security community to just quietly back down, but they didn't anticipate an asymmetrical response. Enter Alberto Daniel Hill. Remember him from that 2017 case we just talked about? Well, having survived the ultimate silencing tactic of wrongful imprisonment, Alberto actually transformed his personal trauma into a powerful advocacy framework. He stepped right into the middle of the B Prime situation, acting as a sort of digital knight. His whole philosophy is beautifully simple. Use raw forensic intellect and relentless public pressure to bypass the opaque legal defenses of these massive institutions. It's the absolute definition of asymmetric warfare in the digital age. Let's break down exactly how this builds into an actionable strategy. Alberto deployed 4 very specific methods against B Prime. First, he published a public open letter and he gave the firm a strict, non-negotiable 48-hour deadline to notify their affected clients. Second, he totally bypassed their media spin doctors by providing live, irrefutable forensic analysis of the breach directly to the public. Third, he tagged major international NGOs. We're talking the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Amnesty International, just to ensure absolute global visibility. And fourth, he hit them where it hurts by leveraging international data protection laws, filing formal GDPR complaints. And he didn't stop there. He morphed into what he calls a psychological cert. He kept the pressure entirely in the public eye through continuous media interviews, highly targeted podcast episodes, and real-time live audio updates on X Spaces. By absolutely refusing to engage with their legal threats behind closed doors, he essentially forced a manual override of B Prime's entire corporate narrative. He completely dismantled their attempted protocol of silence simply by making the truth totally unavoidable. Section 4. The verdict. A public victory. So what's the final forensic outcome of this clash? When a powerful, opaque institution collides head-on with an individual armed with radical transparency, who actually wins? Well, the asymmetric warfare worked flawlessly. Faced with undeniable forensic evidence, serious international regulatory complaints, and intense, unforgiving public scrutiny, B Prime just went completely silent. Those hostile legal threats against the journalists and researchers, they ceased immediately. Alberto decisively won the narrative war, proving once and for all that radical transparency is an incredibly effective tool for forcing institutional compliance. This explainer really highlights a fundamental choice that we all have to face today. We can just roll over and accept the feudal IT model, a broken system where we're expected to place blind trust in opaque institutional masters who hide their failures while we're the ones left suffering the public losses. Or we can embrace Alberto's model, radical transparency. He took the profound trauma of his own wrongful conviction and turned it into a massive public victory. He created a reproducible framework that forces absolute accountability and actually protects other researchers from being silenced. Which brings us to the end of our forensic analysis today, and I want to leave you with one final, provocative question delivered straight from the expert witness stand. Should we continue trusting these opaque institutions with our most sensitive data? Or is radical transparency really our only true path to digital sovereignty? I want you to think about that security gap. Think about the protocol of silence, because at the end of the day, the choice is ultimately up to us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.